The mines sang in silence. Each stroke of metal against stone was a dirge, a mournful rhythm kept by the millions who labored beneath the crust of Tarsus. 12. A dim, blue-tinted light bathed the tunnels, never changing, never bright enough to see the stars. The Dominion didn't want them to remember the stars. Vale stood at the edge of Shaft 9, hands numb around the handle of his vibro-pick. His breath fogged slightly in the recycled air, and sweat rolled freely down the dark grooves of his spine with a slave collar met skin. He hadn't spoken in 3 years, not since they took his voice module after the failed mutiny. He hadn't forgotten the sound of it, though, sharp, commanding, like a warship breaking through ice. The overseers floated overhead in silence, machines of black alloy and red lights. They needed no legs, no faces, only their stunners and sensors. To look up was to invite punishment. So Vale kept his head low, carving away at the rich ore walls with mechanical precision. But today, the stone cracked differently. It wasn't just the familiar tremble of extraction vibrations or pressure release. It was hollow, an echo behind the rock, and something else. A pulse. Faint, slow, like the heartbeat of something ancient. He looked around. No one else noticed. Just sweat and rhythm and silence. He hit again, harder. The wall crumbled in a ripple of light. Behind it, not rock, but metal, smooth, untouched by age. A panel. Circular. Unmarked. He dropped the pick. That wasn't Dominion-made. It had no sharp edges, no cruel intent in its design. It was old. Older than the war. Older than the fall. He reached out with bare fingers, expecting a jolt or warning signal. But the metal was warm, almost soft. It responded to his touch with a low chime, and the panel slid open, revealing a chamber not listed on any slave map. Light spilled out, gentle, golden alive. Vale hesitated only a second before stepping in. The air changed instantly. Warmer, cleaner. His collar buzzed once and went silent, as if confused. He touched his throat instinctively, then took a breath, and heard it. A voice. Not outside, but within. Tactician Vale. Command status, dormant. Query. Reactivate protocol Emberfall. He froze. That name hadn't been spoken aloud since the Dominion's purge. Since they erased the last free war fleet from existence. Since he was forced to watch his crew vaporize from orbit while shackled. How do you know that name? His voice, cracked through the stillness, hoarse and used. The collar didn't react. No shock, no scream. It was offline, because you are its bearer. You programmed me. The AI's tone was calm, fluid, nothing like the Dominion's sterile drone systems. More than artificial, almost familiar. Vale looked around. The room was small, spherical, lined with dormant systems. And in the center floated a staff of molten metal and coiling light, suspended in a stasis field. The Ember Crown. He remembered it now, dimly. A last contingency, hidden beneath layers of obfuscation and sacrifice. While they hunted his fleet, his engineers buried this piece of him in the one place the Dominion would never look, under the weight of slaves. Why now, he asked. The signal is clear. Dominion protocols are weakening. Their reliance on suppression has peaked. Resistance is no longer a statistical anomaly. You are the axis. His breath came faster. His fingers reached for the staff before his mind could protest. The stasis field parted like mist, and the second he touched it, everything came back. Fleets burning in dark space. The bloodied banners of House Orden. The faces of soldiers who followed him without question. The feeling of control, not of others, but of direction, of purpose, and fire. Endless fire. His collar cracked, sparked, and fell off in pieces. The staff glowed brighter in his hands. He stepped back into the shaft. Nothing looked different, but everything had changed. Spread the word. He whispered, and his voice carried, not loud but clear. The night is ending. 2 rows down, a tall, wide-shouldered miner named Rhine heard him. She turned, narrowing her eyes. No one spoke openly. No one dared, but she met his gaze. He nodded once, and that was all it took. The fire moved quickly. In under an hour, 37 mining shafts received coded pulses through the Dominion's own subsurface columns. Tools became weapons. Hollow cutters were modified to focus instead of diffuse. The Ember AI, now seated in Vale's staff, opened every lock schematics file the Dominion thought purged. They didn't strike immediately. No, Vale knew better than to waste fury on the strongholds. Instead, they vanished. They disappeared into the old veins, the ones the Dominion thought empty. There they built in silence, away from the machines, away from the Watchers. And above, the Dominion marked it down as a system-wide power fluctuation and dismissed it, because they always did, because they never believed that what they called slaves could think, let alone fight. Vale stood at the threshold of the hidden chamber once more, staff in hand, watching as the last of the engineers completed the modification of a tunnler into a mobile command hub. Ryan approached, her face streaked with, or dust, her eyes steady. "We're ready for Phase 1, she said. He studied her. "You ever see stars before the mines?" She shook her head. He extended the staff. "Let's go steal them back." And far above, in the cold corridors of the Dominion's orbital palace, a report arrived late. Unread. Dismissed. Minor disturbance. Tarsus 12. Possible signal anomaly. It will be their last mistake. The Ember Crown pulsed softly at Vale's side as the star cruiser Ashbourne emerged from the tunnel of void light. Outside the viewport, the Dominion forge world of Carthus Prime hung like a wound in space. Vast, angular, bleeding molten rivers into orbit. It was alive with fire and function, belching titanic plumes of gas and metal as it birthed new weapons of war. Dominion vessels swarmed its stratosphere like hornets, thousands of them, disciplined, sleek, and deadly. Vale did not blink. "This is madness," whispered Kale, the former Dominion engineer who now served as rebel strategist. He leaned over the console, voice caught between awe and terror. "Their orbital grid tracks movement down to a sparrow's blink. We won't reach the surface, much less breach the spires." "We won't need to," Vale replied. He turned to the center of the command deck where the Ember AI shimmered in semi-holographic form. Faceless, genderless, wrapped in circuitry that constantly shifted like flame. Around it stood Rhine, arms folded, her armor burnished from the recent refits. Sarah, silent as always, her eyes black from ocular implants. And Aaron, a child when the mines fell, now their youngest cyber savant. The crew was small, but they were not weak. "They built Carthus Prime on the bones of our ancestors," Vale said. "They made it a symbol. Today it becomes a signal." The Ember AI's voice entered their minds simultaneously. "Tactician, trajectory confirms penetration point. Spire core breached via underground access in 10 minutes if stealth holds. Suggest primary attack within 23-minute interval." "Good," Vale said. He turned to Ryan. "You lead the insertion team. Get to the cooling wells. Plant the charges. Aaron and I will enter the grid hub." "And me?" Kale asked. "You're staying here. If this goes wrong, you carry the spark." Kale hesitated, then nodded. "For what it's worth, they'll call this suicide." Vale gave him a thin smile. "Only if we fail." The boarding pod detached in silence, cloaked in a skin of reactive alloys stolen from Dominion salvage. Inside, for rebels moved without words, cradling weapons forged from mining tools and forgotten tech. The tunnel into Carthus Prime's underbelly opened without resistance. The Ember AI had already infected the local systems, whispering false reports and scrambled logs. The descent was long. The Forge World's heart was deep, shielded behind layers of obsidian alloy and fire-choked corridors. But the rebels had studied its weaknesses, mapped its arteries. Dominion arrogance had left a trail. They'd never imagined their technology could be used against them, especially not by those they had deemed less than human. When the pod opened, the heat was immediate, oppressive, alive, radiating from endless rows of plasma reactors and molten conduits. Ryan nodded once, and her team vanished into smoke and shadow. Vale and Aaron moved fast, guided by flickering data points fed directly into their neural chips. The path to the grid hub twisted through maintenance tunnels thick with ash and heat vents. They reached the first security gate in silence. A Dominion sentry drone hovered nearby, a gleaming orb of teeth and steel. Erin blinked. A pulse of blue light surged from her fingertip. The drone froze midair, blinked red, and dropped lifeless to the ground. "I never get tired of that," she whispered. The gate opened. Inside, the Dominion's control nexus shone like 1,000 suns. Circuits and holograms spun in endless layers, a core of living fire housed in obsidian. It was beautiful in a cruel, indifferent way. Erin moved to the interface. "They haven't caught on. I'm ghosting our presence in 24 locations at once." Vale placed the Ember Crown into the central conduit. Immediately, the room dimmed, then flared. The AI's voice rippled through the chamber. Dominion intelligence grid now compromised. Uploading false memory strings. Local defense fleet rerouted. Initiating internal sabotage loop. "Shall I begin countdown?" Vale looked through the viewport at the forge world beyond. So much suffering had been manufactured here. So many lives broken to craft the weapons that enforced their servitude. He could almost hear the cries still echoing in its walls. "Begin." Far below, Ryan's team planted the last of the charges in the cooling wells. Steam hissed from cracked valves. Dominion workers, other slaves, barely aware of what freedom meant, stared wide-eyed as the rebels moved through the facility like ghosts. Some reached out, some bowed. None sounded the alarm, because the spark had already caught. As Vale and Erin extracted from the hub, the countdown began. 10 minutes. 9. "Exits compromised," Erin said, voice tight. Multiple Dominion craft incoming. They finally noticed. New route. No time, unless you want to walk through 5 squadrons. Vale pressed the staff to the wall. The Ember Crown hummed, and the barrier melted, revealing an old magrail chute that led straight to the upper docks. "We don't walk," he said. "We fly." They jumped into the shaft and let gravity pull them down. Behind them, the control hub erupted in a flower of heat and code. The Forge's AI screamed in confusion. At minute 2, the Ashborn opened fire from orbit, targeting the outer antenna arrays to prevent signal relays. The Dominion fleet, still circling a ghost signal far across the planet, had no time to respond. At minute 1, Rhine's charges detonated. Carthus Prime cracked from the inside, the cooling wells imploding in a chain reaction that tore through reactor chambers and fuel silos. Fire rolled up from the depths like a tidal wave. The Ashborn caught the escape pod just before the shock wave hit orbit. The explosion was visible from 3 neighboring systems. On the command deck, Kale stood speechless as Dominion comms went dark, one by one. Rhine sat in silence, armor blackened, eyes wet. Erin pulled herself to her console, blood streaking one cheek, and began a broadcast. Vale stood at the center, staff still glowing. He spoke not with fury, but with clarity. "This is not the end. This is the answer. We were born in chains, but we rise in flame. Today, the forge burned. Tomorrow, their throne." The signal broadcast across 100 slave systems, and in each one, a spark caught. The throne world of Syrinx stood shrouded in artificial auroras, its upper atmosphere lit by containment fields and orbital weapons arrays. Below, the Dominion's citadel, an obsidian monolith that pierced the sky like a spear, housed the central seat of power. For generations, it had never been breached, never even threatened. Within its armored walls, the High Sovereign ruled unchallenged, a god among mortals. Until now, Vale watched the planet spin slowly from the command chamber of the Ashborn, now accompanied by a dozen rebel ships formed from the carcasses of old mining freighters and repurposed Dominion scrap. Around him stood the people who had survived Tarsus, 12, who had torched Carthus Prime, who now bore the weight of what came next. "This won't be a strike," Rhine said, her voice hard, scarred by war. "This is suicide, only if we play by their rules," Vale replied. He turned toward the center of the chamber, where the Ember Crown pulsed with a fierce, steady light. It no longer whispered only to him. It had grown, connected to the minds of their fleet, to the uprising across 100 systems. The rebellion was no longer scattered. It was networked. It was alive. Erin tapped at her console, skin pale from sleepless nights. We've uploaded a memory virus into the Dominion's fleet core. It'll blind their automated defenses for 6 minutes. After that, we'll be targets. Kale glanced up from a tactical map. 6 minutes to dismantle a throne world. 6 minutes, Vale echoed, to tell the galaxy they bleed like anyone else. He didn't wait for agreement. They didn't need to believe. They only needed to move. The rebel fleet dropped into low orbit, cloaked until the last second. Below, Cyrix's orbital grid flared to life, searching, sweeping. Then the virus struck. Dominion systems blinked, overloaded by phantom commands and false telemetry. In the silence that followed, the rebels dove. The Ashborn led the charge, its hull aglow with re-entry flame. Behind it, the Hammerwake, Siltwing, and Dagger of Light followed, engines howling. Atmosphere screamed around them. The sky split open. Vale's eyes never left the Citadel. He could feel it, even now, a pulsing presence dark and deep. The High Sovereign was there, the one who had signed the enslavement orders, the one who turned empires into cages, the one who called them subsentient, useful biomass. That ended today. Their drop pods landed in concentric strikes, opening like iron flowers across the Citadel's base. Rebel units poured out, not in ranks, but in waves. Miners in repurposed exosuits, children wielding hacked drones, engineers turned demolitionists. The Dominion garrison responded with brutal efficiency, but for every rebel that fell, 2 more took their place. The halls of the Citadel, once pristine, ran red. Vale moved at the center of it all, staff blazing, each strike unleashing shockwaves that shattered walls and bone alike. He moved like a storm, not with elegance, but inevitability. The Ember Crown guided his steps, connected his mind to every fighter, every cry, every breath. They reached the throne chamber in 19 minutes. It was vast, marble black, gold-veined, surrounded by suspended monoliths displaying the Dominion's triumphs. At its heart stood the High Sovereign, tall, robed in white, skin etched with the sigils of authority. He did not rise as Vale approached. He didn't even look surprised. "You've made a mess," he said, voice serene. "But chaos isn't revolution. It's noise. You mistake noise for change." Vale stepped forward, unflinching. "No, you mistake silence for consent." The Sovereign's eyes narrowed. "You were broken, engineered to obey. I was reborn in the fire you fed." They fought, but not like soldiers. The Sovereign wielded pure force, Dominion technology bound to his genetic code. Energy arcs tore through pillars. Gravity shattered. Time faltered in pulses. But Vale was not alone. The crown bore the weight of thousands of minds now. He was not a man. He was a movement. His staff sang as it clashed against Dominion might, a chorus of vengeance and memory. When the Sovereign fell, it was not to a blade, but to truth, broadcast across every system, every world, every enslaved colony. They watched as the unthinkable happened. The Dominion's immortal voice silenced. The throne of 1,000 years cracked open like a shell. But Vale didn't celebrate. He knelt beside the body, and for a long moment he said nothing. Ryan stepped in, armor scorched. "It's done." "No," Vale said quietly. "This is only the beginning." He turned to the camera feeds, still active, broadcasting to billions. His voice filled the void. "We were called slaves. Machines. Less than alive. But we burned their fleets. We broke their crowns. And now we rise, not to conquer, but to free. If you hear this, know, the chains are not stronger than the fire in your soul. Stand up. Fight back. This is our time." The signal ended. Outside the Citadel, the sun of Cyrix rose for the first time without a shadow cast by Dominion banners. And the galaxy held its breath.